For the 100-year celebration, I really wanted to just kind of expound on that a little bit because times have really changed in 100 years, right? We're talking 1918, so that was quite a ways ago. None of us were alive then. It was the year that my grandma was born, though, so I know that on the night of April 3rd of 1918, there was a massive storm. It was so bad that you could not even see. When you walked outside, you couldn't see. And of course, my great-grandmother decided to go into labor that night, and the midwife had to follow the fence line from her house to my great-grandma's house to deliver my grandma. So, they were having crazy weather even 100 years ago, so I don't think that's changed at all. Kind of like tonight, I guess, it's torrential rain out there, but at least we can see where we're going. So. Well, if you remember a few years ago, I talked about Barnett. The original town of Barnett started out on Highway AA. It was north of town, not where we are right now. And it was in 1880, there was a big old cyclone that came through, and it destroyed the town. And so they rebuilt it. It was just a tiny little community. There wasn't much to talk about it. There wasn't much attention focused on it at that time. They rebuilt, and for 20 years that's where they stayed, and then they got wind that the Rock Island Line was going to build a track through the area, and it was going to come within a mile of the town, and so the townspeople got together and decided that it might be a good idea to get a little closer to where that train was going to come through, and maybe that would help their community a bit. And so they picked up the buildings and moved them a mile north. And so with their teams and wagons and mules and however they got it together, they moved several buildings. And there actually are a couple of buildings still standing that were moved from the original town of Barnett. That happened in 1901. Around 1900 is when they really started planning all of this. And in 1901, they started building the tracks, and it came through. In 1903 was really when the town was established. And the businesses started popping up, and the people started coming in, and it just grew and just became a lively business place. So anyway, in 1901, the Rock Island Line came through. Some of the buildings that were moved were the Old Union Church, which is the church that some of us attend today. It's got a Calvary Chapel sign on it. It's the old church, white church with the stained glass windows that's a little bit off the beaten track, close to the railroad. That church was moved from the old town. There was a barber shop that was located on the corner as you make the curve going into Barnett. On the outside corner, that building there was the barber shop in town, and that was moved as a barber shop to the new town. When you're looking on up from when you make the curve going into Barnett, there's an old white building that's kind of leaning a little sideways. That was the old pharmacy building, and that was moved from the old town of Barnett too. There was also a hardware store that was moved. I don't know where that was. Does anybody know where the hardware store was? The original hardware store in Barnett? I don't know. I'm trying to figure that one out.
Just across around the check on the left, the big tree mom that now made.
Where William's store is?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That was the hardware store? My grandma and grandpa got married there in 1936. Okay, so that's neat. Now we know where the hardware store was. So that building was moved. Actually, but I was told that that building, William's store, burned down and a new building was replaced. So that was the site of that store. In 1900 to about 1920 was when the town was really experiencing this growth. And a lot of people were in and out of town. But what I found interesting was that the population really hasn't changed. It was about 200 people then, and it's about 200 people now. But what was happening was it became a place of commerce and businesses, and people were coming into town from surrounding areas miles and miles away. They'd come in, and when the freight trains would come through, they'd get their freight, take it back to their stores in town. Passenger trains, at one time there were up to 6 passenger trains passing through the town daily. There was bread shipped in daily and sold in the mercantile stores. There were bananas that were shipped in quite frequently in big old 4-foot crates, and they were still on the stalk. And they'd hang those stalks up in the grocery stores, and they'd sell the bananas off of those stalks then. There were also oranges that were shipped in. So, this was a happening place. I have been told by my grandpa, who moved to Barnett in 1930-ish, that in its heyday, you could not even drive a car up the streets of Barnett because it was so packed with people on a Saturday. It was where everybody was. That was the place to be. It was a really important town. And I wanted to read to you. Has anybody ever seen this town? This book, A Few Facts About Barnett? Has anybody ever got a hold of that? Yeah, Bobby does, of course. Yeah. Well, this was written in 1916 by a gentleman named W.P. Slate, and I'm not going to read the whole book to you, but I do want to read the passage about it. He was a man who came through town frequently, and he was very interested. Something about Barnett caught his interest, and so he wanted to investigate a little bit further and interview a few people in town. But this is his perception of Barnett. The village is situated, comparatively speaking, on the brink of civilization. For to the south are the foothills of the Ozarks, to the north the flowing prairie. To the south, the call of the wild turkey answers the electric starter of the Studebaker automobile. To the north, the harsh language of the Saxoneer repairing his blowouts is drowned by the moo of the beef steer and the cackling of thoroughbred hens. While to the south as well as to the north, east as well as to the west, the bray of the Missouri mule, the call of the chicken hawk, and the yell of the coyote blend in the rhythmic melody with the Ford exhaust. That was his perception of Barnett. He goes on to say, I had many times been impressed with the singularity of the place and its inhabitants as I visited it weekly as a drummer, which is a type of salesman back in those days. The thing that impressed me and impresses me so about Barnett is, in fact, nearly every night there is a lodge meeting of some sort or something doing at the church, and quite often a lodge meeting and religious services at the church on the same night. So, there were things going on within the community, and this is the time, this was 1916, the Mother-Daughter Banquet was started in 1918, and so this was the time that these things got started. And, the men had their things. There was the Masonic Lodge that was really, really important to the men here in town. The ladies had the Order of the Evening Star, and then they started this ladies' banquet. There were Sunday school, lessons, there were church meetings, there were, all sorts of things going on. And that's what, this banquet came out of that, and really it's the only thing that has lasted the test of time in Barnett. So congratulations to the ladies, probably because the women decided to do it, right? Yeah. Well, I wanted to tell you a few of the businesses that were in town in Barnett real quick. There were 2 cafes, 3 mercantile shops, a barber shop, a furniture store, car dealers, a couple of car dealerships, a lumber yard, a blacksmith, millinery store, which is hat makers. There was a salad dressing factory. There was a turkey dressing building, which is actually the current city hall. The salad dressing factory was in the post office. That's what it was before that. There was a hotel, which is by the post office. The bank. I wanted to read a little passage about the bank. The bank building, do you all know where that is? That's a building that's for sale on the corner as you make that curve into Barnett. Let me find it here. I wanted to read this because his description of the bank is fantastic. The Bank of Barnett is one of the most handsomely furnished and neatly kept country banks in the state. The rich mahogany fixtures, the beautiful rugs, the costly paintings on walls never adorned with cobwebs, coupled with sweet perfume of flowers and the singing of canaries, presents another one of those amazing facts which can be found in every square inch of the little village. It just seems like this picturesque little town, doesn't it? This is what was going on in our town in those days. Now, there was also the Union Church that I mentioned, and that was called at the time the Federated Church, and what that was it was a community where everybody practiced a different religion. Well, not everybody, but some people did, and they would all meet in the same building on Sunday mornings. And the Baptist preacher would preach one Sunday, the Methodist would preach the next Sunday, and on and on, and they would just rotate the services that they did, and everybody got along and everybody agreed to that. So that was really neat, and that really got started in 1916, and it was really a big deal in town, and it brought in other people who were interested to see how that was working. I mean, how can denominations get along? That just doesn't happen, right? Even today we have issues with that, don't we? But back then they had figured it out, and that community was so entwined and respected each other enough that they were able to do that. And I think that's a lesson that we can all take, with us today. And so I thought that was pretty neat. Now, there was also a telephone office, which is directly across from where the Union Church is now. There's a house there. It's a residence today. It was operated by, the telephone operator was a friend of my great-grandma's. And she would close up the telephone office at 10 o'clock at night. And this was back in the days where, the telephone operator had to connect all the calls. And she was supposed to not listen in. Well, it was a little too tempting. So she closed up the telephone shop at 10 o'clock at night, and then she'd call my grandma, my great-grandma, and give her all the gossip that she had. Sometimes I wish we still had those. I grew up with a party line. Who grew up with a party line? You had to listen to your ring. Yeah, I'm so glad there's people that remember that. Yeah. Well, this was kind of on that. You know, if you really were curious what your neighbor was doing, you just picked up on their ring. Well, if you were the telephone operator, then you just got to hear everybody. So anyway, the ladies were very well informed in this too. There were two schools. One of them was a public school and one of them was a private school. The Barnett Institute was a private school, and you had to pay to go there. And it was pretty darn fancy. They had a swimming pool and a swimming team. They had a volleyball team. They had a marching band. They were very well respected in the community and in the area, and a lot of students rode the train into town to go to school and then rode the train back home every day that they had school. So I think that teacher's name was Mr. Strong, I think it was. So that was over where the Baptist church is today, on that corner over there in town. And then the public school was kind of on the other side, the east side of town, past the curve. You go straight by the Route and Store, make another curve, and then go back. Anyway, it's back along the railroad tracks, right across from my house. That was the public school there. That was. So, here's a picture of one of the cafes. This is Kidwell's Cafe, and I don't know when Kidwell's was going on, but it looks like the early 1900s. And I believe this one was directly across from our current post office. And the building is still there. I think it later became Branstedter's store, mercantile store, or it was right next to it. Am I right? Yeah. And then here's a picture of the stockyards. The stockyards were a major deal in the area. There were so many cattle shipped out of this area that I think it was the most cattle ever shipped out of the state was shipped out of Barnett. There were also hogs that were shipped out, corn was shipped out, turkeys were shipped out. But the stockyards were there to hold all of the livestock, and they would drive them in on foot, or they would haul them in with their mules and wagons. I don't know, whatever they do, they'd get them in there, and they would hold them in the stockyards. And in that photo of the stockyards, look in the background. This sits directly behind the old grain elevator, the Barnett elevator that we have. You can see in there the grain elevator, and then you can also see the back of the pharmacy building there. So it's real faint, but you can see that in there. There was also a saloon, and then of course they had to have a jail because they had a saloon. There was also a funeral home, so I don't know, maybe those went together, maybe they didn't. The funeral home is still standing. It's actually a residence today. If you go out, if you come into town on the gravel road by the cemetery and come on into town, it is the second house on the left. It has some shutters that have hearts on them. That's the old funeral home, I've been told. Yeah, am I right? I think I'm right. That's what I was told by a couple different people. The Masonic Lodge and the Order of the Evening Star, the ladies, they were meeting in the meeting hall above the Roughton General Store, which is the big green peeling paint concrete building that's there across from the grain elevator. Somebody owns it in this room. I don't know who it is. Is it? Oh wait, it's me. I own it. Yeah, I am going to fix it up. I have plans to turn it into a general store again and make it really fun, but it's a huge project, so we'll get to it. We'll get to it. We're on track, but it's taken a while. But anyway, upstairs there, and I don't know if I got a description of that or not, but marble staircases, expensive rugs. Apparently it was just gilded out to the hilt. You know, it was really a spectacular place. So I don't think I can live up to those standards with my budget, but we're going to try to bring it back to life in some sort of way that's reminiscent of the lifestyles that were lived here in town. All sorts of activities going on in town. I wanted to read one passage just to sum it all up, and this was the closing of the book here. This pleasant little Barnett town, how like utopia you are. After I earn my fortune as a drummer, I shall come to thee and seek shelter under thy protecting wing, in order that I may spend my last days in peace and satisfaction. Hold on to your Sunday school and federated church, your lodges, schools, special road districts, And when I come to stay with thee until called upon to leave for that country where so many others are, I hope to find your improvements still improving and your enlargements still enlarging. And there was actually a statue that was erected to this gentleman in Barnett in 1916, the same year he wrote this book. So it made a big impact on the community. You know, they were very honored that he would come and write about them in such a nice way. So anyway, one more thing I wanted to pass around was these are copies of some of the old receipts and registers that were businesses here in Barnett. So take a look at that too. And the last thing I wanted to read was, you know, this has been going on for 100 years, and the Versailles Leader Statesman puts in the date line. Have y'all ever read that, where it gives you things that were happening several years ago? And last week there was in there, Lois cut this out for me. In May 16th of 1958, it says the annual mother-daughter observance was Saturday, May 10th at the Barnett Union Church. That's where this event was held for many, many years until the church shut down, and then it was moved, I believe, to Assembly of God. Now, I don't know if that's where it started. Maybe some of you do, but it's very possible because that was, one of the main buildings in
When
town.
I started coming to it was there, but it started leaking and raining and everything, so we had to move it.
Yeah.
And I think we got oversee what is now the Mennonite Church for a few years.
Okay. Oh, that makes sense. So it has moved around in town throughout the years.
I'm getting ready to leave this world. I'm getting ready for the gates of pearl. Keeping my record right, watching both day and night. I'm getting ready to leave this world. To prepare a mansion, Jesus said he'd go. If it were not so, he would have told me so. Just a little while to linger here below. I'm getting ready to leave this world. I'm getting ready to leave this world. I'm getting ready for the gates of pearl. Keeping my record right, watching both day and night. I'm getting